NFL draft is less than 2 weeks away. I'm Connor from the Dolphins side, and I'm going to be breaking down who the Miami Dolphins should draft in the first round. Starting on the offensive side of the ball, I really think there's only one position group that the Dolphins should target in this draft in the first round, and that's the offensive line.
Keep him safe.
But one exception, if the Dolphins were to go outside of the offensive line in the first round, maybe consider wide receiver Brian Thomas from LSU. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of taking a wide receiver here with the amount of assets the Dolphins already have invested at the wide receiver position, but if they perceive that as the best value pick and that's the highest pick on their board, then I'm not fully against it. The Dolphins have made a clear effort to go get a wide receiver 3, but I think with the addition of Jonnu Smith that it's really not necessary, especially with Waddle and Tyreek already on the team. But time to go on to the offensive line, which I think the Dolphins should target in the first round if they decide to go offense. Starting with offensive tackle, and honestly, I think that's the dream scenario for the Miami Dolphins, in my opinion, is to go out, draft an offensive tackle that can go be Teron Armstead's backup as well as his replacement once he retires after this season. Some names on that list of tackle that will be in the Dolphins range. There's a lot of different guys because this offensive tackle class is so good. Most of these guys are going to be gone by the Dolphins pick, but I'm sure 1 to 2 of them will still be around. Tyler Guyton most likely still will be around by the Dolphins pick. Amarius Mims from Georgia, J.C. Latham from Alabama, Troy Fontenot from Washington, and then Talisi Fuaga, who most likely won't make it to the Dolphins pick. But I think in a dream scenario for the Miami Dolphins, they can either stay at their pick or trade back a little bit, go ahead and get their tackle for the future. It's a premium position that they can go get taken, and he doesn't have to necessarily jump into the fire right away, be Armstead's backup, learn from him, and potentially compete for a guard spot, which is more of a need for the Dolphins, but less of a premium position. On to the guard position for potential people the Dolphins could target. Obviously, everybody's talked about Jackson Powers-Johnson being a Miami Dolphin. Now, the Dolphins went out and signed Aaron Brewer as their center, but that doesn't mean JPJ can't be drafted by the Dolphins. He could easily slide in at the guard position. He's a little bigger and less athletic than Brewer, so it would make sense for him to slide into the Miami Dolphins at the guard position. And of the positions on the offensive line, I would say right guard is the main hole, as it's currently just Robert Jones competing for the right guard job. Left guard, we have Isaiah Wynn, as well as some other people like Liam Eichenberg. I know everyone loves him, but overall, the offensive line, you're just drafting competition. None of these guys are necessarily going to be plug and play, but they're at least competing for a job, and you hope they can go out and win it. The next guy on the interior offensive line, Zach Frazier, also a college center, but absolute stud offensive lineman. I believe broke his leg, but he's already rehabbing and almost fully back to himself. He's like a 3-time state champion wrestler, which always correlates on the offensive line as leverage as a huge thing at that position. I'm a big fan of Zach Frazier, especially in a trade back scenario, as most mock drafts have him going in the second round to late first. So at minimum, the Dolphins can go back and trade, acquire more assets as we don't have the most draft picks, and then go ahead and take a stud in Zach Frazier, who once again is a college center, but should have no issue converting to the guard position. And moral of the story, in my opinion, unless the Dolphins have a clear-cut guy that's available at 21, I'm a big fan of taking the trade back because, like I mentioned, we don't have a third-round pick. I think the best-case scenario for the Dolphins is to trade back. I'm not saying a bunch of spots, but say 8 to 9 picks, and that can usually get you a decent haul. Say they potentially get a third-round pick or multiple fourths or something like that. You just increase your chances of getting quality players because you have more chances at the plate to go hit a home run. Now, it's not necessarily always pan out that way, but I'm a big fan of potentially trading back in this draft. And then the last interior offensive lineman is Graham Barton, and he's played all over the offensive line. I think he's played literally at all 5 positions, which that versatility is always good, but then there's always that concern of like, where will he actually find his footing in the league? Daniel Jeremiah wrote that he should be able to hold his own at tackle, but he projects him more as a very good interior lineman, which I'm all for. If you get a stud interior guy, there's no issue with that. Like I said, I'm kind of more on the boat of I want to see them take a tackle that can compete for guard. It's just confusing because our need at guard is at right guard, and then our need at tackle is going to be at left tackle. So they're on different sides of the line, and I don't like moving offensive linemen around. I just don't think it's good for their development. Graham Barton obviously has that versatility, but he doesn't project well as a left tackle. So if anything, he'd be more of once again, a guard for the Miami Dolphins. That's it for the offensive side of the ball. Comment down below if you miss anyone you'd like to see the Dolphins target, obviously there's plenty of good players. I just don't want to see the Dolphins target any of the other guys available aside from the ones that I mentioned. Now onto the defensive side of the ball, and this is the position where I view similarly as offensive tackle in the first round if the Dolphins were to go that route, is the edge position. Now once again, it's not a dire need for the Dolphins. We obviously have Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, and we just signed Shaquille Barrett, but you can never have too many edge rushers, and that's a premium position. And sometimes they usually take time to develop, so you can get a guy, let him learn, or let him at least fill in until those guys get healthy, and then take a back seat, be a rotational guy, and just to continue to learn how to play in the NFL. But I think that'd be probably the best route if the Dolphins were to go defense, is to take a defensive end. So some of the top names that will be available in the Dolphins range, starting with Chop Robinson from Penn State. He's a very athletic, raw kind of guy. He's got an interesting pass rushing move that people don't necessarily project will work at the next level. But once again, just a ball of clay that's a super athlete that could potentially have a very good transition into the NFL. Next guy is Darius Robinson, kind of on the opposite of Chop Robinson. I know same last name, but he's more of a not raw guy, but he's kind of a power, can play on the interior as well as the edge spot. CK Parrott on Twitter had a good post about him, how he was the perfect fit for the Dolphins to help kind of be a rotational interior guy and then fill in at edge when needed. But then the Dolphins went out and signed like 5 to 6 interior guys, so I wouldn't necessarily view that as a desperate need anymore. So Darius Robinson's kind of a good versatile guy that can play all over the defensive line, which could be very beneficial, and once again, a good trade back candidate if the Dolphins look to do that. Next guy on here, Latu, a UCLA pass rusher. The Dolphins have already drafted one of those in Jalen Phillips. Once again, very good guy and would be a good fill-in and kind of project him out to be a very good pass rusher for us for years to come. Bradley Chubb's contract's pretty hefty and you can get out of it in a couple years. So if they wanted to do that, you have another guy in the pipeline. And once again, you can never have too many defensive ends. Look at the freaking Eagles who have like 10 of them at all times. And once again, premium position, they cost 20 to 25 million on the open market if they're really good. So I don't mind if the Dolphins were to go at the edge position, especially while we wait for Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb to become fully themselves again. And then the last guy at the edge position I have on here is Jared Verse from Florida State. Similar to the previous guys, I don't know much about these guys. I'm not going to act like I watched a bunch of film. He's probably going to be gone by the Dolphins pick, but you can never go wrong taking defensive line. Staying on the defensive line, if the Dolphins look to replace Christian Wilkins with an interior defensive lineman in this draft, there's really 2 names that will be available at the Dolphins pick potentially, and starting with Jerzon Newton from Illinois. Once again, none of these guys are going to be Christian Wilkins, but you would hope that they could potentially develop into becoming a top interior defensive lineman. Like I said, it's not really a desperate need anymore, as the Dolphins had went out and signed like 5 solid interior defensive linemen. Once again, none of them are crazy talented. Obviously, they got signed for cheap for a reason, but when you have that many pieces that are all quality NFL starters, 2 or 3 of them are going to end up working out for you. So it's not a desperate need for the Dolphins, but if they were to, Jerzon Newton would be a potentially good fit. When I watched this film, it was a little tough. I was on a plane, and it's hard to see if you don't have the right angles, but he definitely was able to get some good pass rushing production, was able to get after the quarterback at a pretty high clip. I felt like he was a little weak against the run in comparison, but I mean, having the pass rush upside, you can always develop and work on those things. And the Dolphins signed a lot of good people that could help stop the run, so they can go out and get a guy like Jerzon Newton, who maybe they just use primarily in pass rushing downs. And then the last guy is Byron Murphy from Texas, another interior guy that you could look to develop him into replacing Christian Wilkins. Like I said, I don't think defensive line's a desperate need. And overall, I really do think the Dolphins have set themselves up for success. Whether they take one of these positions or not, they've set themselves up to take best player available. The Dolphins have some weak positions, but none of them are clear holes. The Dolphins have competition everywhere, and they're not going to be pinholed to take one specific position in the first round because they feel they have to. They can sit and pick, take best player available, or they can go and trade back, collect more assets so they have more swings of the bat, and continue to just take best player available because, like I said, they've set themselves up to where they can take best player available by what they did in free agency. And that's why I commend Chris Grier so much. I know some people think I deride him, which I just don't. I just think that he's making good decisions for the best interest of this football team. And now they're into the NFL draft without needing to take a position and can take the best player available and to continue that cycle of just collecting good talent, and they'll find the field somehow, whether it's on the offense or defensive side of the ball. So comment your thoughts down below. Like I said, I'm just a big fan of stick and pick, take best player available, or trade back, collect assets, and continue that. Comment down below who you want to see the Dolphins draft in 2 weeks. Appreciate you guys for watching. Like and subscribe to help the channel grow. Check out the Dolphins Dive for the best Dolphins merch out there. And until next time, fins up.